Hey, all, thanks for watching. I just wanted to quickly inform you about my financial services agency, which operates in the life insurance space. So we help families with debt elimination plans and create tax-favored retirement solutions. We support small businesses, nonprofits, worker-owned co-ops, unions, and social enterprises with employee and member benefits. We offer white glove insurtech services to community banks, credit unions, financial co-ops, and CDFIs. And we provide enduring acceleration and downside capture strategies for all kinds of investors. Check out the link in the video description and enjoy the show. Welcome to another edition of the Mindful Marketplace here on Biz Radio US. I am your host, Joel Skeen. If this is your first time with us on this program, we talk to the entrepreneurs, the advisors, industry leaders, investors, and economic experts who are not only solving a market problem to make a profit, but they're also solving a social problem to make an impact. It's where we learn how to connect our money and our businesses to our values, our community, and ourselves. Today, I am super excited to getting to talk with a friend of mine. Her name is Diana Yanez, who is the wealth management advisor, financial empowerment coach, and founder of All the Colors. Okay. All right. I am excited to get into the conversation here with Diana Yanez. Welcome, Diana. So good to have you here on the show today. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. I'm excited to be here.
So, as I mentioned before, you are a CFP, you are a financial coach, you are all about financial wellness, and we have a lot of things in common that I'm excited to get to talk about here. But I kind of wanted to start with something you had put up in a writing of yours online. You said that money is more than numbers; it's about empowerment. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. And that's actually inspired by a quote by Morgan Housel, who wrote The Psychology of Money. And he says that money looks like math because it has numbers, but it's much more like psychology. And when I say the word empowerment, I often talk about like owning your power with the decisions that you can make with a lot of things in life. And with money especially, we often think that there's a right way to do things. There's a way that, like, if I knew better, then I would be able to figure out this problem, right, of like of money. And in fact, it's more about understanding that day to day, as money questions come up, it's knowing that you are able to answer those. And
Mm.
if you look at my part of my mission is working with women and people of color, and often, even if we're not directly told money's not part of your world, in some ways we are,
Mm.
right? So empowerment would mean, as money questions come up, feeling that you are able to go and either get the help that you need to make the decision, seeing that you're capable. It's a financial capability.
Yeah, I've been in the financial services industry almost 10 years now, and I definitely do think there's a bit of a narrative out there that ordinary people can't understand finances and that it should just be left to the professionals and to the Wall Street advisors and to these things to make all their decisions for them. But it seems to me like that might not be the case, and it seems like what you're saying is that you're actually trying to give people the tools to make their own informed decisions. Is that right?
Right, right. Because there's a lot of, I mean, the financial services industry in general has a lot to gain from people being confused,
Mm.
right? That's when you
Mhm.
look at our like, what is a fiduciary? Is somebody that's supposed to do the right thing by their client. And yet we have people who are not fiduciaries who still work in financial services. And why are we allowing that? It's just like that confusion can make this business very profitable for the financial services industry. So as consumers, unfortunately, we're the ones that have to be really well versed. We have to understand what it is that we're buying, what it is that we're asking even. And the empowerment part is knowing that you are able to. I always tell people, like, if you're working with a financial service person, and they could be selling, like, there's all kinds of products that can be abused. But if whatever product they're selling you, if you don't understand 100% what it is that you're buying, go somewhere else.
Mm.
It's on them to explain to you what you're purchasing.
So, yeah, because if you don't have that clarity, there may be a reason for that.
Hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned working specifically with women and with people of color, people from disenfranchised community with your practice. What particular challenges do those communities face?
I mean, we can start with women. Women still earn 80 cents to the dollar of a man. And if you look at like Latinas, which I'm Latina, it's 53 cents to the dollar.
Hmm.
Women also have more longevity, right? So they tend to outlive men by about 10 years, and they take more time off for caretaking. So look
Hmm.
at all of these times when they're not creating income. And then as
Right.
people of color, there's the racial, Fong Long, she's another financial planner. I don't know if you've had her on the show, but she talks about the racial wealth divide, not the racial wealth gap. And she says, when you say the word gap, it implies that there's something you can do to cross the gap. But divide, the racial wealth divide, really points out the fact that it's structural, right? So
Yeah.
studies have shown that when a woman walks in to get a car loan, she automatically is going to pay about 1, 2, 3% more in interest for that car loan. Similar if you're a
Hmm.
person of color. And as a person of color who's also white skinned, like I get to see that. I get to see how my family members that are darker skinned than me are treated versus how I'm treated. And the financial services space is a very white space. It's a very
Hmm.
male space. If you look at, I think women have been 20% of the financial services for like 10, 15 years. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't increased. Like, how is that possible that you could use a brochure from 15 years ago and still have the same numbers? Even if it's not said to us directly, it's not a very welcoming space for women, which is very confusing because it's a perfect career for women. There's so much
Yeah.
flexibility in being a financial services provider. As a certified financial planner, there's like the income can be really good. You're helping people. It really is a helping profession. But I guess it depends on what avenue, what part of the industry you're in.
Yeah, and it depends on sometimes the company that you're in too. Like the company that I partnered with when I first started doing well in financial services was very male dominated when we started. It was kind of a boys club a bit, but there was actually an intention put by the owners of that company to do their best to change that, and we now actually have over 50% of our licensed agents are women. And as you said, it's such a great career for women. And also, I think I like what you said too, because a lot of times the people who are coming to a financial planner, you want to have someone who kind of understands where you're coming from and who understands the challenges that you may face, and if they're unique to someone else. And I'm a guy, like a lot of times I might not think about the fact that you might need to be considering things like maternity leave. You might need to be considering things like child care or some of these other things that just don't occur to someone if them and everyone else they are surrounded in have a homogenous experience where they're not taking into account the experiences of all the other people. It reminds me a bit of Rianne Eisler, who wrote The Chalice and the Blade. I remember she was talking about this once, where she said the way that we think about money and kind of meritocracy and some of this stuff is a little skewed. Like if you had a couple over for dinner, let's say you had just had a baby, you and your spouse had just had a baby, and you had a couple over in your apartment building for dinner, and the husband was a plumber, and you had a water issue in your sink, and the plumber decided, hey, he's your neighbor, but he's going to help you out with this. We wouldn't really think twice about paying him for that service, right? We wouldn't think twice about giving him some money for the professional expertise that he provided to us. But if in that same dinner, let's say the woman in the couple was having difficulty breastfeeding, and the mother on the other side of the table, who's the neighbor, she helps you fix that problem and teaches you how to feed your child. We wouldn't think of paying them for that, even though that service is so much more valuable than fixing the pipe, right? That is, being able to feed your child is such a much more valuable um, experience and learning opportunity than being able to fix that pipe. And so, yeah, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts coming up as I'm saying that.
I mean, I'm thinking of the joke that if Adam Smith had to do his own. Adam Smith is the author who wrote The Wealth of Nations, and he's seen
Yeah.
as one of the like fathers of capitalism.
Hmm.
So if he had to do his own cleaning and grocery shopping, maybe he would have included the core economy, which is all the household work, inside The Wealth of Nations. But because it was women's work, and women were not considered full human beings in the 1700s, people who are darker skin were not considered full human beings until the 1950s in the US. We're growing who we give agency or value to, right? 500 years ago, obviously it was only white men, and we're now transitioning that. But the old structures are still so in place, right? So yes, breastfeeding is part of the core economy. It's unseen work. There's also I remember hearing somewhere that in retirement, men often have access to like side income, hustle income, because they do carpentry or because their hobbies are more, they're easier to monetize,
Right.
right? Whereas childcare, a lot of the times it's just expected to be unpaid. Like, oh, you're a neighbor, you're not doing anything. Here's my child, take care. Like it's just, it's that division between the core economy, which I think it's called household economy. There's some term for it that just
Hmm.
devalues it even more. It's how we think about labor and what labor is paid and what labor is unpaid.
Yeah, and even if you go back before capitalism, it's just a value of markets and of trade that you're paid based on the amount of value that you add to someone else and to their life and to the market, right? But there does seem to be a disconnect where some things are that are very valuable are not represented in that market and are not compensated for in that market, but other things
Yeah.
that maybe don't actually add all that much to society, but they do add, some they do cushion the pockets of someone who's already wealthy. They get paid really well, even though that may not actually add a whole lot to society and to people's lives. So we can get off a soapbox, I
Yeah.
guess, for a bit. But I. So how did you how did you get how did you get into this line of work? I know that you said you started in social services. Is that right? That was something we had in
Mhm.
common.
Right. So I actually worked in a financial, like a broker dealer. I worked at Merrill Lynch in 2007, 2008. So right when Lehman Brothers was falling apart and Merrill
Hmm.
Lynch was purchased by Bank of America, I worked in the philanthropy department. We looked at requests for proposals from nonprofits that wanted to have their assets managed. I also worked in it was kind of like a charitable giving, or it was a training place that they had at Merrill Lynch. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was established because Orange County in California, where I lived at the time, had gone through a lot of embezzlement. And as punishment, they had to create this group, this cohort that was honestly like 80% of the people of color worked in that little department. The rest of the
Hmm.
Merrill Lynch, no, the majority of the Merrill Lynch employees were white. And I left Merrill Lynch thinking never. Never will I work in finances. It is not the world for me. I don't know any multimillionaires that I want to invest their assets for. I kind of felt like I was a used car salesman in some ways of
Hmm.
like selling snake oil. It didn't make sense to me. And I started to work. I was volunteering at a place for people experiencing houselessness and mental illness, and that's how I started working in social services. I was volunteering there, and then I was offered a job.
Hmm.
I stayed there for about a year and a half, and realized that I either had to go back to school and get a master's in social work, but more than that, I was too empathetic. I was like having such a hard time leaving my clients at work. I wanted to make sure that my agoraphobic clients were going out, and that's like I could feel myself wanting to visit them outside of, and I never did because it would be unprofessional. It wouldn't be safe for me. But I remember how burdened I felt by that.
Yeah.
And from there, it was a couple of other career shifts before I was volunteering at Toastmasters, which is for public speaking. And I
Hmm.
met a certified financial planner who gave me a brochure from the CFP board that said, Financial planning, a great career for women. And I started to like tentatively test the waters. Like when I started to go to financial planning association meetings, I was pretty gun shy to come back into this industry. I'm glad I did though. I'm a numbers person who loves people. I'm a people person who loves numbers, and I get to really use both sides of my skills in this work.
How did that time in social services shift your paradigm when it comes to financial planning, and how do you bring that into what you do now?
Wow. I'm thinking of one particular experience. The first person I worked with who was going through domestic violence, her children had been taken away.
Hmm.
And here I was, this like naive, what, 20-year old, 20, maybe 22-year old. And I didn't understand why she was upset that her children were taken away and why she did not want to leave her abusive husband. It didn't make sense to me why she was not seeing that she wanted the wrong thing. And I don't think I said it that tactlessly, that bluntly, that judgmentally, but she could tell that I was not on her team, and she never showed up for an appointment again. And I just realized, like, wow, I have no idea what other people are going through. And now I bring that sensitivity to my work with money, because again, money looks like 1 + 1 = 2, but it's hardly ever like that. I think I talk a lot about money and food, because food can look like nutrition, and yet there's so much more to it, right? There's community, there's memories, there's numbing that we could do with food, similar to like financial therapy.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that experience, I remember that experience with the woman going through houselessness. And I also remember I had a client who was coming out of addiction, and they had given her an apartment. She was, I think, in her late 60s, but she missed her community back when she was actively using and she was houseless, because there were people around her. And now here she was encapsulated in this little apartment where she didn't connect with the people at her senior center because they all had grandchildren. And she was like, what am I going to tell them? My stories of like passing out in random ditches. Like, what? So how does that connect me now? It reminds me that having the right things, she had the house, she had the safety with like knowing that her food was going to be there all the time. It wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Money
I'd love to turn the question on you. Like, how did working in social service affect the way that you do money?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Well, thank you. I think so. When I went into social service, I remember that the biggest thing I brought with me was I had to do this thing where the organization I was with, where I was running a food bank and doing some homeless prevention programs, was empathy training. So we had to go through this whole process where we had to learn how to speak in a way that demonstrated that we were able to empathize. So I had to learn how to say things like reflect, to actually notice the emotion that someone was feeling and then be able to reflect that back to them. And as someone who was, raised as a guy and told, kind of taught to not even really connect with my own emotions, recognizing those emotions in someone else was pretty difficult at times. When I was in my 20s and very focused on what I wanted, and, kind of had a very, I-it relationship to the world rather than an I-thou relationship, the Martin Buber idea. And that really opened me up, because I had to sit and look at someone and go, oh, they're feeling angry. And I could look at them and be like, man, that sounds like that would make you really angry. And they go, yeah, it would. And then they would expound on more and then tell me more. Or like, oh man, that sounds really frustrating. Or man, that sounds really exciting. Just being able to actually notice what the other person's experience was allowed me to then, reflect that back into myself, which I think, definitely helped me in my ability to connect with clients and my ability to really understand what is it that they really want here. Because a lot of times people have two reasons for doing something. They have the one that sounds good, and then they have the real reason. And one of my first, sales trainings was to ask this question. All right, in addition to that, what else? Because so many times just that simple question will get down to that deeper level and get past that surface. So thank you for asking. We do have to cut it here, but this is going to be a 2-part conversation. So we're going to come back with Deanna. Cannot wait for part 2. We're going to dig in. I got a whole list of questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. But in the meantime, make sure to tune into bizradio.us and listen to the Mindful Marketplace, but also all of the other fantastic shows that we have on here. We are all entrepreneurs all the time. We're one of the only independent business talk stations that I'm aware of. Listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartMedia. We are now up on YouTube, so subscribe to the video podcast on YouTube. And until next time, make sure to take care of yourself and take care of someone else.